Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We're brought to you by Pelican, built tough for all situations. Go to pelican.com. Yak Gadget, for all your fine kayak fishing accessory needs. Go to yakgadget.com. Eastport Marina, on the beautiful shores of Dale Hollow Lake. For all your lodging, kayaking, and fishing needs, go to eastport.info. Now let's get this show started.
Welcome back to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin Podcast. I am your host, Sean Lavery. That is the new intro since we have Eastport Marina now as one of our show sponsors. So hope you guys like that. It's a little different than what my usual intro is, but it's definitely kind of keeps me in line with all the other podcasts on Paddle and Fin. So before we jump into tonight's guest, who you guys who are checking this out on YouTube can see at the bottom of the screen. Don't spoil it for anybody else, but a few quick housekeeping things that I wanted to talk about real quick. First thing is the first Paddle and Fin tournament of the year is coming up on Dale Hollow Lake, April 2nd and 3rd. It's live on Tourney X right now. And if you sign up before March 1st, I believe it is, you get entered into a chance to win lodging down there. And if for anybody who hasn't been there, I was able to go down to the last Paddle and Fin meetup we had there. It's a beautiful area. The marina there is awesome. Eastport Marina. The houseboats are amazing. We stayed in an awesome cabin when I was there. So they have just tons of different amenities there, and let alone the beauty that is Dale Hollow Lake. So be sure and check that out. Also, I wanted to highlight the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League that Paddle and Fin kind of took over from Drew Gregory and the Hooked on Wild Waters folks. You can find that on paddleandfin.com/fantasy. It's free to enter. Make sure and there's great prizes to win. So definitely check that out. You can, set different lineups every week this year. So it's definitely a little bit more challenging. Don't look at my standings. I'm way down in the pack because apparently I did a lot better when you could just pick one team all year long. But anyway, make sure you check that out. So that's all the housekeeping I have. So without further ado, I want to welcome back for the third time on the Bass Fishing for Noobs show, Bassgeek himself, Mr. Hank Rogers. Welcome back, Hank.
What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. What's been new with Bassgeek since the last time we had you on? I looked back. I think it was April of 2020 the last time we had you on.
Yeah, a lot, man. I mean, we're pumping out a lot of things. The YouTube world is changing. Shorts are becoming a bigger deal now. We've got we're TikToking, we're reeling, we're a lot of weird stuff that a fat redneck from southwestern Virginia never thought he'd be talking and doing. So
I gotta say, yeah. It's taking me a little bit to get used to the reels, like the short stuff. I kind of dig the real in-depth, half-hour long, really dive into different techniques. But I mean the quick taste that you get from the reels is good too. I mean you get a lot of juice in a little amount of time, I guess.
Yeah, and that's me, man. I've always been about the details. And I love to work expos and shows and meet my subscribers, because I always say, there's nothing special about me. Trust me. I've been married 28 years. My wife has beat that into my head repeatedly. There is nothing special about me. But the only thing that's special about me is obviously the bunch of crazy people that like to come and watch. So, I figure it's kind of like watching a train wreck for most of them.
Yeah, you got to watch the NASCAR races for the crashes, right?
Exactly, man. Come on. But it's been good. Last year was a little tough on me. I've been married to the wife now. In June will be 28 years.
Wow.
High school sweetheart, love her very much. Actually, finally, after 6 years, talked her into doing a live stream with me the other night. So we did. Her Valentine's Day present was to get to hang
I saw
out
the
with
highlights
me.
of that. Yeah.
So, pretty funny stuff. But that's sort of, I told her for years, she was like, when are you going to get me a house? When are you going to get me a house? I was like, baby, I love you. And I was like, but I haven't made a 30-year commitment to you, much less a house. So, it's kind of what kept me out of going in debt. But then she was like, well, she's like, you're not going to get to do this full time unless I'm in a house first. So I'm like, all right, we're going to get you a house, girl.
I can make that happen.
Yeah. So now I'm not full time yet, but we're working that way. We're trying to get there.
Awesome.
The shorts are great, and they're a good and bad thing. Like anything in the world, it's they can be used for good or they can be used for evil. For me, on the YouTube side of things, they're blowing my channel up as far as subscribers go, but you don't get paid for those views.
Gotcha.
So I'm kind of losing money in one aspect.
I was going to say it's a double-edged sword. Your numbers are going up, but you're not where it counts, I guess.
Exactly. So, which I love it. I'm happy people. And I was in Columbus. This whole ramble that I'm going on here kind of comes back to my subscribers, the two people or groups of people that I love more than anybody, my wife and my subscribers. And, so the thing of it is, I love to do the expos because that's what I get to do. I get to go out and meet the people that support the channel. And, that's just energizes me. I just feed off their energy. It's just amazing. But, last year, because of the Rona and all that stuff, which I've never drank Rona. To me, it's a spring break, college girl drink. I don't understand why everybody keeps getting sick off of it, but
yeah, I think that brand name might have got ruined. They might want to have the marketing guys think up a new name for that.
But yeah, sorry, man. I'm just rolling. I'm rolling right now. I jumped up, but anyway.
Man.
But yeah, we that's sort of the thing, man. I got to get out and got to meet a lot of people, and that's what I heard, man. People were loving the shorts. And that's awesome. It's really helping the channel grow, and we're seeing probably the best January, February that I've ever had since I've been doing it. And, it's just crazy how people have taken it. And you, like I said, me, I'm all about the details. So 60 seconds, I can push a lot of details into a 60-second short.
Right.
And I think people are really enjoying that. So different, man. Things are changing. Things are evolving, as things always do in the IT world.
Just trying to keep up, man.
Yeah.
I heard you in the video that we're going to talk about a little bit later. I heard you reference that you were a Cisco engineer, and I too am an IT guy. So on the Paddle and Fin crew, I think I'm one of the few IT guys. So it's nice to talk to another fellow computer geek as well,
Yeah, and that's actually where the name come from.
Gotcha.
Was being a computer geek of sorts, and that's where Bassgeek come from. So
awesome. All right, man. Well, again, for the folks who didn't catch the first two times on our show or haven't heard you, just give the folks a little bit of who you are. I know you said you're from Western Virginia. Yeah. So, how you got started into fishing and kind of what led you to Bassgeek?
Gosh, that is truly a long story on both cases. So I'm going to try and shorten it down as much as I can because
you're getting good at, getting that down to like 60 seconds. So no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. But, I grew up fishing, bass fishing really took off for me probably when I was about 13-year-old. My grandmother, unfortunately, at the time, my mom's mom had lung cancer, and so they would during the summertime. I'm a Gen X kid, so we were basically unbridled, and she'd take me to a small lake that was just above the house where my Papa had a tin boat, and we'd take the car battery and the trolling motor and a few poles. Me and my little brother who was 12, my best friend who was 12. And man, we just spend all day on the lake and run in the woods, that's just kind of what we did. And, that just progressed. As far as how Bassgeek come along, it was kind of a surprise to me. I never really wanted to get into it. I'd coached for high school football for about 13 years. And, I seen Tactical Bassin talk about the GoPro and how you should have a GoPro, and they said the magic words, which was, it's like watching game footage. And I'm like, oh. So, being an offensive defensive line coach, I watch a lot of game footage. And but at the same time, being an IT guy, I was like, man, I remember everything. I don't need no camera. I can remember what I was doing, the retrieve I was doing, da-da-da. Well, I was wrong. I took and stole the high school's handy cam, strapped it to the back seat on my Triton, and filmed me. And it was right when the A-rig first come out. It was all, hot and heavy. And so I threw by this, I was fishing what they call a gut or a ditch, and threw by a piece of standing timber out there and caught two smallmouth right off the bat. That was my first catch on an A-rig. So I thought that was the greatest bait ever invented. And, as I went back and watched it, I just kind of got into editing. I'd taken television production classes in high school. When me and my wife first met, I was actually going to go to college. I was doing sports broadcasting.
Okay. And
so it's kind of weird how it all just kind of led back, to this sort of stuff. Back then, I'm so old, I fart dust. So, it's back then it was all videotape, VHS, it wasn't, there was no computers back then.
Right.
I think we might've had Windows 95 had came out the year before my senior year. So
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So, I was like, well, man, I got to cut out all these dead spaces in these videos. And so I just got into playing around with it. And my kids and a couple of guys at work was like, dude, you really need to put those on YouTube. And I was like, no. I was like, I spend all day listening to teenage kids cuss and go on. And I'm like, I don't need to hear them saying that stuff to me, because I'm like, I might take a belt to them. You never know. But and that the more they just all kind of talked me into it. In no way did I ever expect to be staring down the barrel at 50,000 subscribers. I mean,
that's awesome.
It's like I always said, if I made it to 5,000 subscribers, I was like, I'm a superstar. So it's very unexpected and very appreciative. It's allowed me to enjoy and do a lot of things, have a lot of fun, baits and stuff, and get to try a lot of stuff. And, but like I said, it's nothing about me. It's all about everybody else out there listening and watching.
Was the the instructional side of it, was that more from coaching, or you just seem to be naturally a teacher kind of? So, when I got into IT, I think I've always sort of had that teaching whatever. Growing up, I never really had anybody that bass fish. I had, my grandfather, he crappie and, trout fished and, that sort of stuff, whitefish. And, so everything I learned from what I call beating water, literally taking a lure and just beating the heck out of the water with it until I figured out when it worked and when it didn't, And so that was just kind of, I'm a pretty methodical guy. I like to plan and think out as much as I can. And, I like the details of bass fishing. That's, the
the problem solving. I think most IT guys that I know that get into bass fishing, that's really what they enjoy about it, because it relates to what we love about IT. You
Right.
know, the devil's in the details, right? And you know, so that's kind of, you know, what it was for me. And I just kind of thought, because back then when I started, there was one guy, you know, which was, you know, the OG Mr. Fluke Master himself that was doing it. And it wasn't that he was doing it wrong. I mean, obviously, but, you know, I still felt like a lot of pros that, you know, didn't tell you the full story. They didn't, and sometimes they just didn't simplify it down to you enough. They wanted to keep it very general. And that's the thing. I want to simplify it down and say, look, these are the details you need to start with this bait or this technique. Now, as I say, if you're catching fish on a Carolina rig buzz bait, the only person that should ever tell you that it's wrong is the fish when they stop biting it, you know?
Right.
Always think outside the box. Always think different. But, you know, I wanted to at least give you a solid platform of when, where, why, and how to start from. And that's something that I never really had, you know. It was like, I fish highlands reservoirs. And when you hear people talk about, you know, fishing in the winter, they're like, find those 45-degree banks. Well, they're all 45-degree banks where I live. It's 45 to 90. I'm like, so they're all good? No.
No, doesn't work like that.
Trust me, I tried. So I try to be as detailed but simple detail as I can get. You know, there's some things that I really drill down into, like, you know, I did a video on A rigs, and I really talk about, and, you know, just recently, the difference in different styles of swim baits for different species of bass and different situations and even water temperatures. So I'll drill down super deep into that stuff, but at the same time, you know, like you give me a jig and I'm just like, all right, you just need 5 colors, and most of the time you just need 3 of those. So
no, I think that's why that's probably one of your more popular videos on YouTube is the Jig 101, because it really does break it down into about as simple terms as you can get.
Yeah, and that's just casting, you know, I mean, here it is. Here's the different jigs. Here's what they're used for. Now, you go expand on that yourself.
Right. And I think, you know, going back to the IT thing, I think that's what frustrated me so much when I first started fishing, is because I didn't have that analytical background to break it down. I was kind of just shooting from the hip, you know, at that point. And that's kind of what led me to start, you know, watching YouTube videos online, and because I really wanted to learn. And same as you, I didn't really have anybody, you know, right around me, you know, beating down my door to take me out fishing or show me how they did it or what worked for them. So I was kind of learning on the fly. And now, you know, obviously I have a pretty good background that I can build on, and that mirrors my IT, you know, skills. I can approach a problem, you know, approach a new body of water with a lot of preconceived notions, better or worse.
Absolutely.
But yeah. And, you know,
tell you how old I am. I call it my Rolodex. So I'm like, I can dig through in a situation and say, yes, this one.
Yep.
Our younger listeners have no clue what a Rolodex is. Google it, guys. Google it.
I was just reading the other day about how kids today ask where the save icon comes from. You know, and I'm old enough to remember saving onto a floppy disk. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
But all right, man. Well, again, there's a couple of things that I was going to talk to you tonight about. You know, one of the things though that I really wanted to highlight was I watched a video on your YouTube channel that you did. It was a seminar that you did on the Damiki rig, and I don't think that's one of the few rigs or techniques that we've never covered on the Noob Show. As far as I know, I went back and looked back from when Ryan was still doing this before I joined him, and I could not find anything on the Damiki rig. So I think that might be a new topic for us. So I was going to ask you kind of to do, as quick or as detailed as you wanted to do on that. Because I don't know a ton about it. I watched the seminar, so I know more than I did half an hour ago, but but I still, to me, it looks like an intriguing topic. You said it's kind of starting to phase out, but there are some things you can do to use it right now and kind of make it work as we progress a little bit into the spring.
Yeah. So it's really a cold water deal. And during the spring, now, I don't know how you guys are, but you will get, we'll generally have a shad kill at some point in time during the early spring. And the reason why is because you'll get a sudden warming trend, really warm up. We've got a lot of thread fin. Those thread fin will come to the surface, and then a hard freeze will hit, and it'll kill a lot of those. We'll call them yearling shad. Now, the same sort of thing will generally happen throughout the winter. So it's a vertical presentation. What you can kind of, it's really ice fishing on open water. As far as the presentation goes, it is exactly like ice fishing. So for me, I use a ledge head. You can use a moon eye. The biggest key is that it's a hook that has a 90-degree line tie. And so all you do is you go out and you find the areas where these shad are. And as it gets colder and colder and colder, Mother Nature culls out the weak, right? So some of those shad will die. Now, when you see a shad kill, the few that you see floating is nothing compared to the ones that sink to the bottom.
Interesting.
And so what ends up happening is those shad will sink to the bottom, and those bass, where those shad will winter, out either over deep points or, whatever it may be in your area, those bass will move to those areas and they'll just sit there. Sometimes they'll move up, smallmouth especially, wintertime doesn't faze them. They'll move up, jump into that ball of shad, and they'll eat and chase shad and, the coldest weather you can find. But a lot of times what they'll do is it's a buffet that they don't need to move for. So they sit there and wait for the shad to fall, and they hit them. They eat them. And so the technique was kind of born from that. A spoon is a great thing, but, most of the time you think about jigging a spoon.
Off the bottom, right?
Yeah. And that doesn't always mimic a dying shad exactly. A lot of times a dying shad will just kind of hover and slowly sink and just kind of barely twitch. And so you'll take, the Damiki rig's named after the armor shad, which is the most popular version by the Damiki Bait Company. And it's just a small little 3-inch split tail. Looks like a fluke, just a little 3-inch version. And so what you do is you get out there traditionally. You're using your graphs. You're using your 2D sonar on the front of your boat, or you can do it from a kayak. I got a buddy who runs a kayak who I've showed how to do this, and he's been successful with it from his kayak. And you'll get over top of that school of shad or school of bass, and you'll drop that Damiki rig down, and you'll see them come up, and they'll hit it, set the hook, and bring them to the boat. Now, it's spinning rod. Even though I'm going to guess really the weight depends on the depth. My go-to weight is a 3/8, and I'll fish that to probably, we'll say 40, 50 feet. I can't remember the guy's name, but he actually won a tournament on the Tennessee River on Lake Tellico, Fort Loudon and Tellico. And he was fishing in somewhere around 20 feet, 15 to 20. And so he was using a 1/4 ounce weight. So that, depending on the current, depending on the wind, you adjust your weight. It's like anything. Now I've caught smallmouth over top of alewives out of 80 feet.
Okay.
And so there, or if I get a heavy wind, I tend to move up to that half ounce. So it's not like a drop shot. You're not using super light tackle.
Okay.
But one of the things that I do like is an extra fast tip. Because if you're targeting, and you can catch largemouth with this too, spots and smallmouth seem to be the better, for whatever reason, seem to be the most susceptible to it. But you get out there and you drop that bait down, and a smallmouth, what they'll do is they'll come up and grab it, set the hook on themselves, and then they rock it straight up. So you need that fast tip, to kind of keep up with them as you're reeling, to keep that, because you're talking about very small, very finesse hooks. And the barbs aren't very big on those. So, the bait, once you give it slack, can literally just fall right out of their mouth.
Gotcha.
Generally it is light line. So even though you're using a 3/8 or a half ounce, you're still using, my go-to is 8. I know guys that go as far down as 4 and 3. I don't have the huevos for that. I've gone down to 4. It scares me. You better have a good reel with good, drag.
Right.
And then on top of that, you need a spinning rod or a spinning reel that is a little faster. A lot of your low ends and they're that 5 speed. You want that 6+ speed,
right?
So you can keep up with those smallmouth. Since you're dropping it directly over, you don't really need that long of a rod either. I'll use a 7-foot just to get it out past my trolling motor, because I have set the hook on the trolling motor prop a couple times, and it hurts. Man, but you think you got a big one for a second.
Oh, yeah,
it's like, and then it about pulls you overboard. But, it's a fun technique. It's video game fishing. I mean, 100%. And it's video game fishing well before we ever got the forward facing sonars, the live scopes and that sort of stuff. Really all you need is 2D sonar to do it. I've got some great pictures on my Instagram and stuff, where you can literally see it looks like hands, just lines coming up off the bottom, to see your bait. Now as we progressed, and as the fish have become more pressured, it used to be kind of like ledge fishing. You would graph over an area, you'd see the fish on the bottom, and those are the fish you'd fish for. Now, in my area, Damiki rig fishing is it's huge. South Holston, Watauga, Cherokee Lake. Of course, everybody, if you know the Bassmaster, that's where the name, the Damiki rig kind of got big, kind of got out. And so now, everybody does it. So those fish are now so hard to catch because those fish are sitting on the bottom. They're not necessarily feeding. So now what's happening is we're taking our forward-facing sonar, and those big schools of shad actually generally have bass in them. So you can scan through that big school of shad that's still near that school of bass that's sitting on the bottom, and you find those active bass, the ones that
makes a lot of sense.
Feeding. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They're not going to be in the middle of the bait ball if they're not feeding.
Exactly. And so now you can take that Damiki rig, and there's another technique where I'm from called tight lining, where you take a little head, a little ball head, just simple little ball head, 1/4 ounce or even less. And you use a Berkeley Gulp minnow, or sometimes we actually use, oh my gosh, I just went brain dead on this one, but floating flies.
Yep.
And I always call this the simple man's floating fly, because a floating fly, traditionally, you got like a 10-foot rod and this huge leader. Well, it's the same exact thing. You just have a regular like ultralight rod and this super tiny fly, and you just throw it toward the bank and let it contour down the bank while you're just barely shaking. So we call that tight lining.
Okay.
So that what's happened is these have kind of hybrided together now. It's a hybridized version of the Damiki and the tight line. So now when you see them out there, you just kind of make a little pitch and you just shake it and let it fall down through that shad, and then you catch the active bass.
Interesting.
So,
what kind of soft plastics are you rigging on that generally?
You can really use a little bit of anything, especially when you're tight lining it. Now, if you're direct vertical fishing, believe it or not, you want to stay above the fish. So even if the fish, remember when I said it's a lot like ice fishing? So it's the same concept. If you're vertical fishing them, you want to stay above them. So if that fish comes up to it, you want to raise it just a little bit. Raise it just a little, raise it just a little, raise it just a little. And then finally, either they turn away from it or they turn up and hit it. And you'll see that in a lot of ice fishing situations. You see guys keep that bait above them. Keeping the bait above them seems to be the key. But as far as the soft plastics go, I mean, again, we can go back to the feather jigs. We can talk about, the Damiki armor shad. I have used the 2.8 Kitex with and without the tails. Sometimes I'll cut them off. Anything, and now there's a host. I think V&M Tackle make a little version now. A ton of people make different versions. Even believe it or not, even the TRD. Now, the problem with the TRD, I don't like the actual Z-mans for it because it tends to float up. So this is a situation where you want it kind of neutrally buoyant to drop him, because as you get it deeper, as that water pressure pushes against that plastic naturally wants us to push back. So the deeper a plastic gets, actually the more buoyant it becomes. So once you get down to so deep, it's why, one of my favorite heads is the ledge head, drop head, because he puts a lot of the weight kind of keeled underneath that bait. So at 40 feet, it's going to fight against that bait from wanting to keel up and keep it more horizontal. So, anything you can imagine, but you want the least amount of movement possible, because generally this is a cold weather situation.
And you're pretty much just dead sticking it at that point, right?
You are. Now, sometimes, if they'll sit there for a while, I'll give it a couple of real turns to see if they'll maybe just get that reaction out of them.
Gotcha.
But for the most part, you're dead sticking it.
Interesting. That obviously those kind of techniques where you're doing, no movement and stuff, it really does tie into the cold weather. Now, as it warms up, do you just pretty much bail on it at all, or what can you do to kind of adapt that for as the water starts warming up?
Now, early spring, it really is kind of the same thing. And I actually seen, I don't remember who it was, but they were actually talking about followers. So they were talking about their forward-facing sonar. This is actually a great idea. I've not put it into practice yet, but they were fishing something, maybe swim baits, which is, again, one of my favorite things in the world to throw. But for whatever reason, if the bass wasn't hitting, they would come out, follow that bait, kind of go down to the bottom underneath the boat, and they were using a Damiki rig as a follow-up bait. So they'd drop it down, and every once in a while they could catch one or two of those fish. I think they said it was about 33%, so about a third percent they would convert. I mean, that's pretty good. And so that's a pretty interesting concept.
So you get them to follow the swim bait to the boat, and then once you have them there, then you drop the Damiki rig on them.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
exactly. So
interesting.
And that's something that that's another technique that I've kind of used, with even before. Now, I didn't use the Damiki rig, but something that I always like to do. I love to fish swim baits on ledges, during the summer. And even with 2D sonar, you'd see your bait come back, and then you'd all of a sudden see 2 or 3 lines or arches. So you'd know you were getting followers. Well, a lot of times what I always do is keep a 4 or 5 inch with a 1/8 ounce belly weighted hook, a fluke, or, one of my favorites is the Strike King caffeine shad. And so you just throw that thing out there, count it down, and then twitch it upwards. And a lot of times those followers, as they're going back, or even if they've hit the swim bait and they don't eat it, you throw that out there, and they see that as a dying shad, and bam, right, they'll nail it.
They think it's the one they hit, and then they come back to finish.
Exactly. Gotcha. So that's so the Damiki rig. One of the things that these guys were showing was that the bass were going to the bottom, so they'd follow, and then they'd go straight after that bait left the water. They'd go to the bottom. They'd hang out there for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then head back to that spot that they, for whatever reason, were wanting to set up on. And so that was a pretty interesting insight, so, and for the most part, once we get into, I would say, mid pre-spawn, I do kind of go away from it. Once those bass really do begin to come up shallow and commit to coming up shallow, I put it down.
What would you say is the shallowest depth you can kind of, still fish it and be successful? Because it seems like, if you're going to be directly above them, it's not going to be a super shallow bait, because otherwise you're going to be spooking them pretty easy.
That 15 to 20 foot mark.
Okay.
Now, if you're casting out to them, you're making a little cast out, you might be able to get away with a little different, but definitely, that 15 to 20 foot mark is going to be the cutoff line.
I think if you're casting out to them, though, it's probably pretty hard to get it to just hang out in the part of the water column you want to, right?
Yeah. If you're casting out to them, you're really coming down through shad, and so
pendulate through there. Okay,
exactly. That's
gotcha.
You might give it a couple of twitches so it darts, just to get their attention. Out of those thousands of shad that it just fell through. So
awesome. Okay, well, I think that was a pretty good dive into the Damiki rig. There's a few other techniques that I saw that intrigued me. One I didn't mention to you before the show, and I apologize for springing it on you, but I thought about it as we were talking, and only because I fell in love with it last year, and that's the lipless crank. And you were talking about how that can be super good this time of year.
From literally as soon as it starts to warm up. Now, the dead cold winter, I kind of prefer a blade bait, but it's really worked the same way. And you can take, as those bass begin to warm up and move a little bit, I think that little bit of rattle is a good thing. So a lipless crank it's really one of the most, and people don't realize this, it's one of the most diverse little baits that you have in your bag. I gave, I think, 3 different types of, maybe even 4 in that video, types of retrieve. And one of them that's, kind of a East Tennessee thing, which is where I fish predominantly, is, I just call it the flip-flop. And you just take that bait, throw it out there, let it sink to the bottom. you kind of know where that school is, and you dead stick it for a few minutes, for a minute, or so. And then you just barely twitch it to where all you want is you want to almost feel that bait. And you'll feel that bait just flip on its side to side. And then you dead stick it. And then those bass it just annoys them so bad. Even in the cold water, they just can't stand it. So you'll do this again and you'll be like, oh, and there they are.
That's exactly the retrieve that intrigued me, because I've heard yo-yoing and burning it across the tops of grass and stuff like that, but I'd never heard that technique before, and I was like, that is definitely something I have to try, because I could see where it could be effective, super effective, especially right now as the water is just barely starting to heat up. I think that's going to be money. So that was one of the things as I was thinking what else I wanted to talk to you about, I'd kick myself if I didn't mention that, because it's one of the things that as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I'm going to go try that.
And then, going back to those shorts, one of the things that I kind of didn't talk about in that video was paying attention to the type of nose that your lipless has. I was talking about, I think I was holding up one of the LVs and one of the red eye shads. And that red eye shad, you can see I've just beat all the paint off the nose. That red eye shad has got a wide, flat nose. And when you burn that bait, it really tends to run nose down. So you get out on some stump flats or where there's some, scattered, old laydowns and brush, that nose, those sandy flats that might have a few stumps, that nose digs and acts like a square bill. And, so some of them are made best for yo-yo, and the LV is a great yo-yo. But if you look at that red eye shad, which is also, it's got a great vertical fall, but it's also got that real wide nose. The Profound Outdoors Shaker Z, I think, even has a wider front nose, and you can really burn those in the shallow, and they'll deflect so well off of some small stumps or rock or wood. You wouldn't believe it. I mean, it protects when it's running like that, just nose down. It protects those hooks so well.
And I think that's why I didn't throw the lipless for the longest time, because I just looked at it as a crankbait without the bill, and I was like, this is going to get hung up left and right.
Yeah.
But it really, I fished the Susquehanna a lot, which is rocky, and I thought for sure it was just going to get snagged left and right.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does come through pretty well. Now, obviously, you still get times depending on what you hit and where you go, but it does make it through a lot more than I thought it would. So,
yeah,
if that's what's holding you back from throwing a lipless, just give it a try, because you'll be surprised at what it actually does come through.
Yeah, it's coming up on. I mean, like I said, you can do the flip flop and I call it the blade yo-yo, where you just get it to just barely just about 4 or 5 times and let it drop. You're not really ripping it or lifting it off the bottom as much as you would, once we get into, mid-spring. For me, I'd say around mid to late March, when the yo-yo technique really, a bigger pull. Like right now, I'm going to use the flip flop and just that little bit of pull, just that. I want to do it maybe 4 times and then let it fall back down. And, but yeah, the lipless is a player right now coming up. And I mean, big fish player,
Is that a kind of water temperature thing where you kind of change up your retrieves, or what starts you to change that up?
It is. It's a water temp sort of deal. Once we start seeing those low 50s, I'm going to start moving it off the bottom a little more, get away from that flip flop. Once we get in those mid 50s, I'm going to give it a little more movement. Once we're right there, 58, I'm going to start looking for flats and burning and bumping and stump hopping, right before we get into those, those 58 to 64, right before those fish, are really like, all right, it's love making time. Let's go.
And then the fun starts. Yeah,
exactly.
But yeah, it's still a good time leading up to that too, because like you
Yeah.
said, they kind of shake off that winter sluggishness and really just start
Yep.
figuring out, hey, I got to start eating because it's going to be busy time here coming up soon. So
Yeah, they really start to tie on that feed bag around that 55, 58, and you'll get that, just run for a few weeks. The biggest problem is you just got to stay with them with their progression.
Right. Now, for me here in Pennsylvania, we still got a ways to go for that because our water temperatures are still, we just barely got our ice off a week or two ago. So we're finally back to open water again, but it's definitely still really, really cold. So, and now they're saying possible snow tomorrow night again. So who knows if we'll ice back up or not. But it's definitely something I want to have ready to go in my arsenal. So I'm looking forward to that. So.
Yeah, that's somewhere actually I really need to come. It seems like I have a huge amount of fans in Pennsylvania for some weird reason. so I've got to find a good expo up there and maybe next year make that trip since I went to Columbus. So
well, just last week we had the Great American Sports and Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. I think that's the biggest one in PA that I know about.
Okay.
So that's usually around this time every year. So if you're looking for one, and hey, if you need a place to stay, I got a spare bedroom,
All right, man. All right.
25 minutes from there. So, not far.
We'll hook up next year and we'll go. I mean it, because that's something, like I said, man, last year was such a struggle for me just with everything, getting the house ready. I didn't get to do, take care of my channel the way I wanted to. And, it got real depressing, man, there for a while. In the middle of the year, I was kind of like, you know what? I think I'm going to quit doing this. And, thought about it more seriously than I had ever thought about quitting.
Okay.
And, got with a couple of guys. I'll give a big shout out to Burley Fishing. I don't know if you know those guys or not, but they kind of pumped me up. My guys, Debo and Tackle Junkie, Debo's Fishing, they kind of build me back up. And, I just decided to dig back in, and I'm like, you know what, we're going to make a run at it. We're going to see what can happen with it. And, got the wife in, got the house done. Last year just, I'm sorry about the language, but it sucked, man.
No.
With a capital S. And, the tournaments I had were just awful. It was just, I was just not in it. And, generally the first part of the year for me is the business end and expos. But I swear I didn't realize how much being around the subscribers, dude, how much energy that I just feed off of it. It's just so, I tell people all the time, if you do this sort of stuff, you do social medias, you do podcasts, man, you've got to go to the shows. You've got to, find a booth you can work, get a booth. I don't care what you do. Just let your people know that you're going to be there, because they're not just numbers, or, they're people. And when they come to you and tell you things, how much what you do means to them and how much it helps, and how they've caught their biggest fish, or their kids have caught, their first fish. I mean, it's just, if that's not why you're doing it, then get out. I mean, really,
I hear you, man. That makes so much difference. Like when just anybody comes up and, like you said, I'm, Joe, nobody sitting in his basement in South Central PA talking into my computer.
Yeah.
But when somebody comes up to me or messages me and just says, hey, love what you're doing. I learned this from you. And, it is what keeps the fire going. 'Cause it does get tough,
Yeah.
And especially last year. I mean, last year was tough on everybody for so many stupid reasons. But as a fan and as a subscriber who is lucky enough to get to talk to you at times, I'm super thankful that you worked your way through and you're still, doing, you're right back on top, kicking all sorts of good content out. So definitely glad that you pushed through, because you do teach me a lot, and I can speak for a lot of my listeners who reached out and loved the episodes that we've had you on. The amount of good information that you put out is just amazing, and like you do have a gift for it. So I want to echo that as much as possible and keep it going as long as I can.
As long as I can do it, I'm a old fat man, so who knows what's going to happen.
Well, you got the wife, the house, so you're moving.
That's
in the right
right.
direction.
That's right. So hopefully, I love it, man, and I just want to do more. I want to fish more. I want to get better at it. I want to understand things better. I'm no pro. I'm no great. I'm no KVD. I tell people that all the time. I'm just an average Joe who, if you read, my YouTube channel description, it says, just come along with me as I try to become the best angler I can be. That may not be better than, anybody, but it's the best I want to be and I can be. And, I strive to get better every single day. And, and I want to share that with people and share people, what I learn in a non-judgmental way. Like I say all the time, there's always people that are like, oh, you're not doing that right. There's no such thing as wrong in bass fishing. You know what's wrong? Whatever you're doing, even if you're doing it the right way and you ain't catching them. The only judge are green and brown, and those are my only judges. That's right there.
That's
and
right.
If they ain't eating what I'm throwing, I'm doing something wrong. It don't matter if I'm doing it right or not.
That's right. That's right. Couldn't have said it better myself, man. So,
but I enjoy teaching, because like you said, and like I said at the beginning, I just didn't have anybody to teach me. I beat some water up, man, trying to learn.
As did I. And I spent a lot of time not catching before I finally, started figuring things out. So I definitely feel that, that's part of why I wanted to do this show, is because I know what it's like to come in not knowing anything and maybe being intimidated to ask somebody about it.
Yes,
I was that guy. So, that's totally why I started doing this, because I knew in helping other people learn that I was going to learn. And really I've taken more out of the show than I give. And I feel like half the time. So,
that's one thing that I tell people all the time in the comments, tell me what you do. Tell me how you do it. Tell me your retrieve. Send me your GPS waypoints.
Does that work?
No, unfortunately, that's not worked yet.
It's worth a shot.
I've tried. It don't hurt to ask, right?
No, absolutely. You never know.
They like me, but obviously not enough. But
my.
You're right. You're spot on. It really is. I learn as much from my comment section and people talking to me about fishing. I say it all the time, and I think people think I'm full of what. I love to talk. I say my outro is, hey, I love to talk fishing with you, and it's not a lie. Like, you wind me up, and I can talk fishing all day long.
No, my wife she told me when I first said I was going to do a podcast, she's like, you're about as introverted as it gets. You're not going to want to talk to people. I was like, but if there's one thing I can talk to people about, it's fishing. And for some reason, if you put me in a room of strangers, I'm going to be the guy in the corner unless somebody starts talking about fishing. And then I'll be like, I'm good. Yeah. I can, oh crap, it's time to go.
I don't even have to be around strangers. I'm that way during Thanksgiving. I'm just sitting there kind of bored, then somebody goes, you been fishing? Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. I'm good to go then. We can have a conversation. But
alrighty, Hank. Well, thanks again so much for coming on. I want to give you a chance to let people know where all they can find you, because man, if you're on a TikTok now, you've added some different places to your repertoire.
A lot of work.
Oh, I imagine.
But no, you can find me pretty much if you go to Google and you type in Bass Geek, you're going to find this ugly mug. I mean, it's you can find me on TikTok. I think it's just Bass Geek. Everywhere it is either just Bass Geek, one word, or Bass Geek Fishing. Even have a new website. Finally got a website out there, which I do have some plans for. Somebody wanted to charge me $15,000 for bassgeek.com, and I was like, no. So you can go to bassgeek.fishing or bassgeekfishing.com. Like I said, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. It's not only my wife, but seems to be a lot of people like my shorts right now. But no, I don't know why. I mean, I tend to be a little hyper in my shorts because I want to get all this information in. So I'm like, hey guys, let me tell you about this right here. So, so if you want your hair blown back, watch a couple of my shorts. They're full of details, and you'll probably have to watch them 2 or 3 times because, I'm just like,
But then if they want to, odds are they can probably hop on your YouTube channel and find the detailed 30-minute version of those shorts.
Yeah.
And
get
the whole story.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. What I try to do is I put out 2 videos a week on YouTube. And so what I try to do is take something that maybe didn't fit into the video, some sort of tip that might not necessarily had fit. Or a lot of times I just forget. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll make this into a short. And, so the shorts we put on, you can find them on YouTube. You can find them on Instagram Reels, and you can find them on TikTok. So, but we put 2 of those out to kind of follow up the videos about 2 days after. So, right now we are bombarding the social media interwebs with my mug. So
nice. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again so much for coming on, taking the time to give us a bunch of your tips and tricks. And everybody, make sure you go check out Hank's stuff. Check out Bass Geek. Just Google him. That it works because I Googled him right before we came on just to see the last time he came on here, and it pulled up a whole bunch of stuff. So definitely give him check him out, and just keep learning because he's got a lot of great tips and stuff. So everyone, thanks again for tuning into this episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. Have a good night, guys. Thanks again, Hank.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode here on Paddle and Fin. Be sure to drop a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or smash that subscribe button on any platform you're listening in on. Be sure to check us out on WAYPOINT TV, waypointtv.com. Make sure you sign up for the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League at paddleandfin.com/fantasy. You could support this show through Patreon, patreon.com/paddleandfin. Don't forget to check out the website, paddleandfin.com. Catch us on YouTube. If you got a question, comment, or want to see a future guest on the show, be sure to email us at paddleandfin@gmail.com. Shout out to our show supporters, Yak Gadget. You can check out all the fine kayak accessories at yakgadget.com. Pelican Professional. For all your cases, coolers, and lighting needs, go to pelican.com. Rocktown Adventures, your Midwest premier paddle sports destination. Go to rocktownadventures.com. Eastport Marina, the beautiful destination on Dale Hollow Lake. If you're looking for lodging, kayaks, kayak accessories, or anything fishing related on the beautiful Dale Hollow Lake, go to eastport.info. And Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and fill your tackle boxes today.